Science fiction? Where's the science in this fiction? Jojo's Bizarre Adventure was a manga series created by Hirohiko Araki. It was first published in Weekly Shonen Jump back in 1987. The series follows the Joestar family across several decades and through several generations. The series has something of a cult following and is well deserving of the bizarre in the title. The series has been going on for decades, and in 2012 it finally got an anime adaptation. Okay, the 2012 anime adaptation wasn't technically the first animated adaptation of Araki's work. Starting in 1993, there was a series of OVAs, original video animations, of part 3 of Jojo's Bizarre Adventure called Stardust Crusaders, which wrapped up in 2002. Then in 2007, there was a feature-length animated film based off of part 1, Phantom Blood. Despite the fact that this series has been around since before I was born, I didn't really get into it until last year. Honestly, I would have given it a shot sooner if anyone had told me about the vampires in part 1. And technically part 2. This series has quickly become one of my favorites ever. I've watched the whole anime twice, and I am slowly making my way through the manga. It is slow going, because this year I'm just having a hard time reading this year. In my desire for more JoJo content, I found out that there is a live-action adaptation of part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable. And I thought, this is it! Finally, I'm going to talk about something relevant. I love JoJo, my friend loves JoJo. Just people in general love JoJo's. And then I found out that this movie was made in 2017. So I have once again missed the hype train, which is terribly on brand for me. Although telling you about something you may not have heard of is also on brand for me, so I guess it's a win. Either way. Okay, alright, so most of the parts of JoJo's are pretty self-contained. They are, for the most part, their own stories that you can sort of just jump into at any point. I say for the most part because part 2 relies pretty heavily on part 1, and to a certain degree, all of the parts sort of reference the part before them, at least a little in the beginning. So, for example, in part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable, they reference part 3, Stardust Crusaders, in the first few episodes of the anime and the first chapter of the manga, mostly to introduce Jotaro and explain what his relationship is to Josuke. Part 4 is Jojo. Once they've established these things, they kind of just stop talking about anything that happened previously, and we just follow Josuke on all of his adventures. The live-action Diamond is Unbreakable talks even less about things that happen elsewhere in the JoJo universe. So if you're going to consume any JoJo content in isolation, this is probably the thing I would recommend. If you couldn't tell, Diamond is Unbreakable is my favorite part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, closely followed by Battle Tendency, but that's a discussion for another day. This part of JoJo is also kind of different from the previous parts of JoJo. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is both bizarre and surprisingly dark. The art style is pretty wild and over the top, which you would think leads to wild and over the top stories. And you're right, I can't deny that. There is nothing low-key about JoJo. The stories can get really dark, though. I mean, there is a lot of death, and it regularly put my emotions through the ringer.
シーザーの声だ。聞こえたか、シーザーだ。
聞こえた。まさかシーザーが。
シーザー。
Part 4 is surprisingly happy though. It's really bright and fun. Like, the color saturation is maxed out the entire time. It still has its dark moments and like really emotional parts, but for the most part it's just happy and fun. After everything that happened in part 3, I needed the happy. So part 4 is my favorite part, and I was excited that there was a live action version. Not that I'm convinced in any way that the live action version was going to be better than like the source material or even the anime. Generally speaking, I feel like live action adaptations of things as fantastical in nature as JoJo's Bizarre Adventure tend to fall pretty flat. I figured I would have a great time watching them try and pull it off anyway though, and I was actually surprised how much I liked it. It feels different than the original. Both the anime and the manga for Diamond is Unbreakable are bright and whimsical. I guess technically all of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is whimsical to a certain degree. There's just a certain dedication to the absurdity of it all in part 4 that I really appreciate. This is an energy that isn't really present in the live action film. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but what the film delivers is just different than I was expecting. Where the anime is a high speed and wild ride, the live action is a lot more subdued. The colors all seem very muted, and it's set up more like a murder mystery thriller than a crazy action anime. In fact, it reminds me a lot of that movie Seven, starring Morgan Freeman and I think Brad Pitt. The live action part 4 is also less in-your-face fantastical than the source material or the anime. They do throw some pretty weird and intense stuff at you from the start, but it just doesn't feel as wild as the source material, which probably has a lot to do with the fact that there are real people in this movie who move like real people should move, and not as if their bones are made of Play-Doh. The color palette is also pretty tame. The colors have a pretty low saturation. There's actually a green wash over everything. Yeah, that's something that's a lot more noticeable when like the sky is in frame. Tinting the ambient light green is a way to show that something is off. It's unnatural and kind of unnerving and makes sense to use in a film like this, but I kind of wish they hadn't used it, or at least not as much of it. I would have liked it a lot more if they'd gone with a bolder color palette. I mean, this, after all, this is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, not the Adventures of Detective Jojo and Friends. So everything is a little more low-key, which is not a term I'd ever thought I'd use in relation to JoJo, but it is what it is. Despite my issues with the colors used in this film, I love the stands. They're not shown nearly as often as I would like, but they look good. I was actually surprised. I was expecting some silly, half-assed CG nonsense. Instead, what we got was actually really nice and clean. They also fit the look and feel of the film so much better than I was expecting. They also look spot on for the original designs. I mean, when you look at this, you can tell that it's Crazy Diamond or this is the hand. Like, you know. Aside from the look and feel of this movie, I guess we should talk about how it actually does as an adaptation. The characters are surprisingly on point. When making an adaptation, especially when the source material contains such strong visuals, i.e. made entirely of visuals, the look of the characters is just as important as how they act and the story. Hollywood movies, at least, have a very bad track record of keeping the original character designs. And I was worried this movie would stray away from the original designs. If you're at all familiar with the characters in the source material, you know how weird and out there these designs are. Not something I thought filmmakers would be comfortable replicating, despite the fact that there are cosplayers who managed to pull these looks off with a significantly smaller budget than any film production. It's actually pretty impressive. So it's not a surprise that the film went with toned down designs. And by toned down, I mean that these outfits are less about being so wild that they defy physics and more crazy stuff someone had actually put together in real life. All of these characters are recognizable versions of the originals. The outfits have similar cuts and accents as the source material, and they kept key elements from the original designs. Things like Josuke's hair, and whatever the heck is going on with Jotaro's hat. I mean, what is this? The actor actually let them do that to his hair? Amazing. Absolutely fantastic. Don't know what's going on, but it's great. I think the most accurate character is Okuyasu. I mean, look at this. This is on point. I even wrote in my notes that he has real good eyeliner, and he does. I stand by that statement. I am also in awe of how they managed to style his brother's hair. Like, nothing about this is natural, and they managed to make it look like it was something he actually did with his hair. I'm impressed. I still don't know what's going on, but I like it. As far as the story goes, this actually pulls from the first 17 chapters of the manga. We get everything from Josuke learning about his father, meeting Jotaro, and confronting Angelo, a recently escaped murderer. Once all of that stuff is out of the way, we get the confrontation with the Nijimura brothers, and that's it. It's the end of the story. Well, the end of the movie. And the film really does move pretty quickly from each event to the next. They beat Angelo, and they have the funeral for Josuke's grandfather. Then at the funeral, Josuke sees this strange kid and runs off to fight him. So we go immediately from the funeral to the Nijimura fight, which, yeah, is the consecutive order of events. Angelo to Nijimura, but in the original, Josuke didn't bail on his grandpa's funeral to go fight a guy. A few weeks actually go by before he's forced into the confrontation with the Nijimura brothers. He's walking home from school with Koichi when Koichi gets attacked and almost dies, so Josuke has to go and save him. And, voila, he fights the Nijimura brothers. I guess having Josuke notice someone weird at the funeral and then chase after them would save time, and time is, at a premium in most live-action films, especially if you're trying to fit something as long-running as Jojo's into just, the confines of a movie. You have to work fast, so you can't spend time dilly-dallying with time skips. Most of the other changes are pretty minimal. They introduce Yukako at the beginning of the film. Hiroshi is the student in charge of Koichi's new student orientation, because in this version, he just moved to town. And she gets obsessed with him from the start instead of right before her story arc. And Okuyasu creeps around in the background for a bit before he actually fights with Josuke. But the biggest changes are the villain at the end, and the fact that this isn't set in 1999. The original Diamond is Unbreakable is set in 1999. So is the anime, which is important because there are some stories that don't work if you are in a world in which smartphones exist. So, depending on what they decided to adapt going forward, major changes would have to happen. Of course, given how this movie ended, they are absolutely going to have to make major changes if they ever want to make more films. So this film is technically JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Diamond is Unbreakable, Chapter 1. Someone, somewhere, was hoping that this film would get a sequel. And had to let us know, which is fine. Personally, I would love to see a sequel. I need to know how they plan on proceeding with all of the changes they've made. Like, the first time I watched this film, as it was drawing near the end, I kept chanting the name of the villain who I knew was gonna come in and wreck shit. And I was so excited. I was so impressed with how they did the stands, and I was just really excited to see how they pulled off this one guy. I was just so psyched to see him in all his CGI glory. And then, bam, The guy I was absolutely not expecting to show up this early. I was shocked and kept screaming, "What?" at my TV. How could they do that? If he's here already, that means we're going to be skipping over a crap ton of material. Without using the villain I was expecting, a lot of characters won't be showing up either. They obviously plan on keeping Yukako because they've introduced her already. They hinted at Reimi and Rohan, but are they actually going to make appearances? Were those just Easter eggs? I feel like they're too important to just stay, just to be Easter eggs. But who knows? Anything is fair game at this point. Was this something they did specifically to save time and make fewer movies? Did they just not want to deal with just the mass amount of characters? Both of which are fine options. I just need to know how they plan on going forward. And honestly, I might never know. Like I said back at the beginning of the video, this movie came out back in 2017, the same year as Netflix's bad take on Death Note. This is significantly better than that, but it didn't do amazing numbers in the box office. It was number 5 the week it came out, and then the following week immediately dropped to number 11, putting any hope of a sequel in jeopardy. It might have still gotten one just because, like, the IP for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is so popular, but given the way this year is going, it's not looking good for any movies, really. And by the time things get better, I don't think anyone's going to care about a sequel to this movie. I did really like this movie, though. It's not the most amazing movie I've ever seen, but it's the best live-action adaptation of an anime I've ever seen. I even bought it so I can watch it whenever the heck I want. The most upsetting thing, though, is that they use none of the scores from the anime. Like, none of that music made it into this movie. And Josuke's theme is it slaps, and I'm really disappointed that they didn't play it anywhere in the live-action movie. I mean, like,